My name is Jessica Miller, 32 years old, living in Austin, Texas. And that night, I was 8 months pregnant, curled up on the cold bathroom floor, trembling as I called out for my husband while he wore his headphones, yelling at teammates in Call of Duty and said, "Call an Uber, you're not dead yet." I kept wondering, why did I choose this man to be the father of my child? How could love turn someone invisible in their own home? 3 days later, I walked out of that apartment, carrying every document, every bill I ever paid, and one thing he never deserved to have: my trust. Have you ever loved someone so blindly, only for that person to be the one who snapped you out of it? Leave a comment if you've ever felt that way. Hit like and subscribe to hear the next part, where I'll tell you why walking away at 8 months pregnant was the bravest thing I've ever done. I first met Derek on a Friday night in spring, at a community concert in Central Austin Park. I was in my early 20s, newly promoted to head of HR at a real estate company. Derek was on stage with his electric guitar and a smile that made people forget they were sitting on hard plastic chairs in the dusty South Texas wind. He had this way of talking that made me feel like I was the only person in the crowd. After the show, he came down to greet fans, and somehow, his gaze lingered on me a second longer than it should have. I still remember him saying, "You've got a genuine smile. In a world full of performances, that's rare." I smiled like a foolish girl being noticed for the first time, not knowing that one day, I'd learn what true performance meant. And it wouldn't be on a stage. We fell in love quickly, like everything was meant to be. Derek told me about his dream of making music, his unreleased demos, and his spontaneous gigs at small bars on the East Side. He didn't have much money, but he had passion, energy, and something I believed was kindness. I once told Rachel, my younger sister, "Derek has nothing but a guitar and a good heart, but you know what? The way he looks at me makes me feel like I deserve love." Rachel didn't object, but she did once say, "Are you sure love isn't clouding your judgment? I just hope he talks better than he acts." I laughed. Every man needs a little dream in him. We got married less than a year after we started dating, a small, cozy backyard ceremony at a friend's house. I wore a white dress borrowed from a coworker. Derek sang a song he wrote himself as his wedding vow. That day I truly believed I had chosen the right man, someone who could love, live, and dream big, and I was ready to be the support he needed to fly. The first 3 years of marriage passed like a simple painting, but I viewed it with grace. Derek didn't earn much, but I earned enough. I paid the rent, the car, even the health insurance. I told him, "You focus on your music, I'll take care of the rest." At first he still cooked, cleaned, and checked on me if I came home late from meetings, but gradually those little gestures disappeared. Dinner became instant noodles or takeout. The sink was always full of dishes. The trash waited for me to take out. Every question I asked received the same response. "You know I'm busy. I have to finish this album for the studio." I started asking myself, what did busy even mean? Because for days I saw him gaming, watching live streams, or lying on the couch with a beer in hand. Something felt wrong, but I wasn't ready to face it. I clung to the idea that I was the strong, understanding wife, that if I tried a little harder, things would get better. And then came the good news. I was pregnant. I remember standing in the bathroom, holding that 2-line test, my heart pounding, not out of fear, but from a vague hope. Maybe a child would change everything. Maybe Derek would become the man I once knew, the one who told me, "We're a team. Whatever comes, I'll carry it with you." I told him one late afternoon. He was on the sofa adjusting audio from a recording. When I held the test up to his face, he looked at me, silent for a few seconds, then smiled faintly. "Oh, so we're leveling up to parents." I remember bursting into tears, relieved. But I should have been worried, because that line didn't come with a hug, not even a "How do you feel? Are you okay?" It was a statement like I had made the decision, and he was begrudgingly accepting it. The months that followed were filled with my struggle against my changing body and a husband who drifted further away. I was constantly nauseous during the first trimester, had to temporarily leave work due to anemia and dizziness. Meanwhile, Derek kept sleeping in, never cleaned up, and not once did he go with me to the doctor. When I brought it up, he frowned. I'm not the type to sit in a clinic for hours to hear a doctor tell you to take vitamins. I've got bigger things to worry about, Jess. Bigger things? Like ordering pizza, gaming all night, then complaining that his bandmates didn't understand real art? I was ready to leave. But every time I looked at the ultrasound, at that tiny heartbeat in my belly, I told myself to hold on a little longer. For the baby. Eventually, patience turned into a trap, and I didn't even see it, until that night, when he refused to take me to the hospital and said, "You're not dead yet, stop panicking." Only then did I understand. The love I believed in may have never really existed. Or if it did, it was never enough to save me. And it certainly wasn't enough to protect the child growing inside me from a man like that. By the 6th month of pregnancy, my body changed faster than I could accept. My face grew rounder, my eyes always swollen from lack of sleep, my hands were slightly puffy, and my favorite heels had been shoved to the back of the closet. I switched to loose maternity dresses, soft canvas shoes, and always carried water, because the dizziness struck without warning. I thought Derek would understand. After all, he was my husband, the baby's father. But one morning, while I was changing in front of the mirror, trying on an olive green maternity dress, Derek walked past, glanced at me up and down, then smirked. "You look like a walking blob of dough. Is that dress meant to disguise it, or are you giving up?" I froze. Not because the words were cruel, but because he said them so lightly, as if it was a harmless joke. I forced a laugh, pretended it was nothing, and said, "Well, it's nearly 8 months now. As long as the baby's healthy, that's all that matters." He shrugged and returned to his coffee and phone. I didn't cry then, but later, folding clothes alone in the room, I felt my eyes sting. I wasn't sure if I was sad because of what he said, or because I had gotten used to hearing things like that. Now that you mention it, yeah, and that wasn't the only time. One evening, Derek's friends came over, all guys from his band or the recording studio. I cooked a few simple dishes, set the table, tried to be polite even though my back ached and my feet were swollen after a long work day. When I brought out dessert, "Apple pie he used to love," one guy said. "Wow, looks amazing. Jessica's the perfect wife, huh?" Derek laughed loudly. "Perfect wife, sure. Also kind of looks like a perfect ball of dough." The whole table burst out laughing. I laughed too. Laughed to mask the humiliation pounding in my chest. Laughed so they wouldn't see my hand clenched tight, fingernails digging into my palm. Laughed so Derek wouldn't lose face. But that night, as I stood at the sink washing dishes alone, my shoulders began to shake. Not from the cold, but from shame. I started avoiding mirrors, avoided taking pictures, avoided going out unless I had to. Even as my belly grew bigger, I kept wearing long coats to hide it. Every time Derek spoke about me in front of others, I felt a void in the way he used words. There was no pride, lacking all tenderness, only mocking remarks and that tone that made pregnancy feel like a burden I brought on myself. I didn't tell Mom. She used to love Derek, used to say. He might seem like a free spirit, but his heart's genuine. I didn't want to shatter that image. As for Rachel, my younger sister, she had already started sensing something was wrong. Once, Rachel stopped by with a box of homemade brownies. I was slicing fruit in the kitchen, Derek was gaming in the living room. We had barely talked for a few minutes when Rachel asked, "Have you been sleeping okay? Your eyes look really dark lately." I brushed it off with a laugh. "Totally normal. Every pregnant woman looks like this." Rachel tilted her head. "Be honest. Has he been helping you at all?" I froze for a second. It was such a simple question, so why was it suddenly so hard to answer? I was about to lie, like I always did, but then Derek shouted from the living room, "Jess! Grab me a Monster, can't take my eyes off the screen." I turned to Rachel and saw her expression go cold. I gave a sheepish nod. "See? Totally helpful." We both laughed, but the laughter never reached our eyes. After that day, Rachel didn't push. But every time we talked on the phone, she started asking more, staying on the line longer. I found myself avoiding even her, the person who used to be my best friend. I was afraid that if Rachel knew everything, she'd see me as weak, and more than that, I was afraid that if I said it out loud, I'd have to face the very truth I'd been trying to deny. I told myself things like, it's probably just hormones. Maybe he's stressed about music. Things will get better once the baby arrives. But deep down I knew, no loving husband makes his wife feel like an afterthought in her own home. I went to prenatal checkups alone, attended online birthing classes by myself, Googled ways to ease back pain and how to sleep on my side without straining my body. Derek never once asked how I was feeling. But he always asked if I had enough money to cover the internet this month. Because his band was prepping for a live stream. There was only one time he ever seemed concerned, when I mentioned I might need to leave work early because of pregnancy pressure. Derek looked up suddenly, furrowed his brow. Leave your job? Then where's the money gonna come from? I'm focused on the studio. I can't carry both of us. I said nothing because I knew I hadn't been on his list of concerns for a long time. That's when I started fearing myself. I had traded my self-respect for silence, and gotten used to being mocked, and called it love. It was a Thursday night. Light rain fell outside, not heavy but enough to make the air cold and heavy. I lay on my side in bed, one hand on my belly, trying to find a position that didn't make my back ache. The clock read nearly 2 a.m. Derek still wasn't home. I had gotten used to him saying he was at the studio late, but lately, his absences were more frequent and his explanations fewer. I texted him twice, no response, called once, no answer. Around 2:15, I heard the door fling open. A strong smell of alcohol filled the bedroom with his unsteady footsteps. Derek? I called softly, half worried, half alert. He mumbled something incoherent, then collapsed onto the bed, pulling the blanket over himself without even looking at me. I sat up, about to get him some water, when I heard him mutter in his sleep. Melody, don't be mad. I'll be home a little late tonight. Melody, not Jessica, not me. Who? I couldn't breathe for several seconds. My hand gripped the bed frame, body stiff as stone. I wanted to believe I misheard, but then he murmured again, voice soft and tender as if stroking someone's hair in a dream. Melody, you're the only one who understands my music. This time I couldn't lie to myself anymore. I got out of bed, silent as a shadow, my belly heavy, my back aching, my throat dry. But I moved, out of the bedroom, into the living room, where he kept his backpack and phone. His iPhone lit up with a notification on the table. Melody, tonight was perfect. I can still hear your voice in my head. I no longer heard the rain. Everything around me blurred. I knew I shouldn't check more, but I did. And message after message, photo after photo. Every late-night studio session was actually a jam session at Melody's apartment. The studio assistant, 4 years younger, red-haired, thin lips, musical symbols tattooed on her wrists. I found a voice note he had recorded for her. Gus never gets the artist part of me. But with you, I feel alive. I opened his email looking for any sort of confirmation, and found something worse than betrayal. An email from the bank. Personal loan of $18,000 under the name Jessica M. Collins has been successfully disbursed. I opened the attached file. The signature, my name, my address, my social security number. But the handwriting wasn't mine. It was a forged scan. Under loan purpose recording equipment studio soundproofing, EP launch promotion. My fingers went cold. I leaned against the wall, shaking. He had used my name to take out a massive loan I knew nothing about. I collapsed onto the couch, hands over my head, gasping for air. This went beyond cheating. It was fraud. It was illegal. It was a brutal betrayal by someone I once trusted with my child's future. A sob caught in my throat, too raw for words. I looked around the room. Once filled with wedding photos, once my home. Now a battlefield. And I stood in the middle, unarmed, helmetless, with no escape. I picked up my phone and called Rachel. Hello? her voice still groggy. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I burst into tears. Rachel! I don't think I even know who the man sleeping next to me is anymore. She immediately snapped awake. Where are you? Did Derek hurt you? Tell me right now. No, it's not that. But he took a loan in my name, and there's someone else. I think it's been going on for a while. That's enough. You don't need anything else to walk away. Whenever you're ready, I'll help. I turned off the living room light and returned to the bedroom. Derek was still asleep, snoring lightly. Oblivious. Completely unaware that the woman he'd been dismissing for months had just stepped through a door in her mind he'd never be able to pull her back through. The next morning, while Derek was still sleeping off his hangover, I quietly got out of bed. I made him a cup of coffee like usual, set it on the nightstand as if nothing had happened. But inside my coat pocket was a business card from a law office, sent by Rachel right after our late-night call. I texted work to take the morning off and headed there in silence. The woman who greeted me was attorney Margaret Holden Silverhale, low voice, calm eyes like someone who had heard hundreds of stories like mine. I sank into the leather chair, fingers tightening around the armrest. I'm not ready to file for divorce. But I need protection. I'm about to have a baby and I think my husband forged my signature on a loan. I have the email, but I haven't gone to the police yet. We'll start by securing your finances. I'll guide you on separating accounts, tracking all transactions, and, if needed, building a fraud case. As for evidence, I want you to start recording conversations, especially those with insults, threats, or illegal control. That afternoon, I opened a new bank account at a completely separate institution, leaving no trace in any of the accounts linked to Derek. I also redirected my paycheck to the new account, using the excuse that the company changed payroll banks. I started saving every message from Derek, every sarcastic remark, every disrespectful comment, especially those tone-deaf jokes about my body that he'd casually drop into chats like he was sharing some meaningless meme. I turned on the voice recorder whenever he got angry, which usually happened when I refused to hand over money for his new project investments. Once, he slammed the table and yelled, "If you're living off my money, don't lecture me." I gave a dry smile. Your money? The last income you had was from a cafe gig 2 months ago. He looked stunned like I'd slapped him. I hit record as he muttered, "Mouthy woman, no respect at all." I saved that file under the name Mouthy April 14th. I locked every device with passwords, backed up recordings to a private cloud, and sent a copy to Rachel for safekeeping. While Derek took naps or went to artistic meetings with Melody, I quietly searched for housing. Rachel suggested a small 2-bedroom apartment in Round Rock, a quiet area with security cameras about 30 minutes from Austin. The landlords were a kind elderly couple who agreed to hold the unit for me without a large deposit. I went to view it on a light rainy afternoon, my belly clearly showing, supporting my back with each slow step. The apartment wasn't fancy, but it was clean and bright. The kitchen had a window facing a small garden, and the master bedroom was big enough for a queen-size bed and a baby crib. I stood in that empty room and imagined holding my baby, with no yelling, no guessing what kind of mood he'd come home in. I signed the lease and chose the move-in date for the end of the month, right when Derek was scheduled to go on a short tour with his band in Houston. One afternoon, I was packing clothes into a suitcase when I heard the door swing open. Derek came in with a scowl on his face. "Why isn't my secondary card working?" I pretended to be surprised. "No idea. Maybe the bank's doing a security check." He narrowed his eyes. "Did you change the account password?" "No. But don't you think you should ask before pulling money from my account?" Right then, Evan, Derek's younger brother, walked in. He was returning a toolbox Derek had borrowed. Evan's a firefighter, tall, quiet, and usually kept his distance from his brother's marriage. But that day, he paused. Derek turned to Evan, annoyed. "She's starting to control all the money. What, having a baby makes her queen now?" Before I could respond, Evan spoke. "Come on, man. That's out of line." Derek went still, but a shadow passed through his eyes. "What's that supposed to mean?" "I'm saying, if Jessica's pregnant, still working and covering all the bills, you should be thankful, not blaming her." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Evan had never taken my side, at least not openly. Derek let out a cold laugh. So she's got back up now. Evan met my eyes, his voice calm and firm. Jessica, if you need help, just say so. I looked him straight in the eyes and gave a tiny nod. I didn't know when I'd need that help. But I knew, when the last door shut, there would be someone outside ready to hold it open. And for me, in that moment, that look alone was enough to keep me standing one more day. I remember clearly, it was a Monday, the kind of scorching heat typical in Texas by mid-May. I left work late after a meeting dragged past 7 p.m., and Derek had forgotten to pick me up, his excuse being the band had booked cheap studio time during prime hours. I took the bus close to the apartment, then decided to walk the rest less than a kilometer. But after a few hundred meters I started feeling faint. My belly felt tight. A sharp pain jabbed my side. I tried to breathe deeply, but everything around me began to blur. The power poles along the sidewalk seemed to melt into the air. People walked past me. The smell of hot plastic rising from the pavement made my stomach churn. I stopped on the sidewalk, gripping a street sign pole for balance. Sweat poured down my face, my throat burned dry. I instinctively placed a hand on my belly. And then, everything went dark. When I opened my eyes, I saw white ceiling lights above me. An IV was hooked to my left arm and a steady heart monitor beeped softly in my ear. Outside the curtain, I heard rubber-soled shoes, the whir of a printer, the clink of plastic medical containers. A young nurse walked in gently. Miss Jessica? So glad you're awake. The doctor administered fluids and checked the baby's heartbeat. Everything stabilizing now. I blinked, my voice hoarse. What happened? You had low blood pressure and were severely dehydrated. Thankfully, someone on the street called for help in time. Your body's been carrying more than it can handle. I looked around. There was no one else in the room but me and the nurse. Did my husband come by? She shook her head. We called the number listed in your records. No one showed up. I reached for my phone in the purse beside the bed. 13 missed calls. From Rachel, 1 from Evan, 1 from the hospital. None from Derek. I opened my messages. 1 text from him, sent while I was unconscious. Don't forget to Venmo the rent. Not a single sign that he knew or cared, that I'd nearly collapsed in the street, carrying his child. I set the phone down, eyes fixed on the ceiling. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had no more tears left. A little while later, the doctor came in with a portable ultrasound machine. He smiled kindly. Let's check on your daughter just to make sure she's okay too. I nodded, lifting my shirt. The cold gel hit my skin and I shivered slightly. Then came the sound. Steady, clear, strong, the baby's heartbeat. My eyes fixed on the screen. A blinking dot. Then her tiny figure appeared. Face, arms, legs, her curved little back like a curled shrimp. Her heart was still beating strong, unshaken by the chaos around her. I placed my hand on my belly, my voice soft, almost a whisper. Sweetheart, I'm sorry. I let you hear people belittle you. I let you feel loneliness before you were even born. My throat tightened, but this time it was clarity, not pain. I bent forward, kissed my belly gently. But I promise, you won't grow up in the darkness like I did. A few hours later, Rachel arrived. She rushed into the room, face pale with worry, until she saw me smile weakly. I thought you had class. You took the day off. I nearly fell out of my chair when I heard. How are you? I explained briefly. Rachel understood. She held my hand, eyes red. You can't keep going like this, you know that, right? I'm not scared anymore, I see it clearly now. Derek's not just bad, he's dangerous for the baby. Rachel squeezed my hand. We have the apartment, the lawyer, the plan. All you need to do now is wait for the right moment. I closed my eyes, felt the tiny heartbeat inside. That rhythm left me no choice to stay still. I had reached my limit, and from here, I would be the one to decide who gets to step into our lives. Friday morning, at 6:13 a.m., Derek walked out of the house with his guitar slung over his back, his gig bag, and that relaxed smile, like the weekend was his reward for all his artistic sacrifice. He leaned in to kiss my forehead. not knowing it would be the last time. I'm off to Houston. Don't forget to send me the baby's playlist. Maybe it'll inspire us to write some prenatal music. As the door clicked shut, I stood there for a moment, feeling the full weight of the silence, the first time the apartment held only me. Then I took out my phone and sent a message, with just 2 words. It's time. 10 minutes later, Rachel showed up with Evan. They arrived in 2 SUVs with the back seats already folded down. Then came Mia, my best friend since college, carrying cardboard boxes, zip bags, and an energy like she was walking into a military operation. Operation Storm, the nickname we jokingly gave this plan, began at 6:50 a.m. We divided the tasks. Rachel handled the bedroom, folding clothes, baby items, document boxes, and family photos. Mia took care of the kitchen, everything I had purchased or brought from my mother's house. Evan took the heaviest work, electronics, personal equipment, the foldable crib, and portable fan. I focused on documents, organizing evidence, printing copies of bank records, the forged loan emails, and recordings from my phone. Each file was packed with clear date labels and time-stamped notes. I prepared 3 envelopes, one for the attorney, one for the bank, and one to leave for Derek. Inside I placed a copy of the unsigned divorce papers with a note. You don't need to sign, I'll take care of it in court. The latest ultrasound photo, with a handwritten message on the back. This is our daughter. But if you still think this is love, then I choose not to love. A packet of financial forgery evidence, certified by Attorney Holden. Around 10 a.m. I walked into the office, Derek's so-called studio. I unplugged each recording cable, each device he once said was his life. I didn't take anything that belonged to him, but I did remove the external hard drive I had bought. I also took back the iPad registered under my name with the receipt attached. On the desk, I left a music box, the anniversary gift I gave him on our 2nd wedding anniversary, which played Can't Help Falling in Love. I stuck a note on it. Love isn't sustained by songs. It's built on how we treat each other when the music stops. By noon we had packed about 80%. What I left behind were shared furniture pieces, the sofa, the dining table, a few framed prints. I took pictures of each room corner to avoid disputes later. Around 1 p.m. we took a short break, eating sandwiches on the empty floor. The air was quiet but warm. Evan opened a can of soda, leaned against the wall, and quietly said, I still don't understand how my brother could do all that to you. Because he thought I'd never leave. Rachel chimed in, half joking, half serious. Ha 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 ha. And you did it while 8.5 months pregnant. Someone should give you a medal. I gave a faint smile. I did what any mother would do, protect her child before the child can protect themselves. By evening only the small stuff remained. A few old shoes, some unimportant books. I went into the bedroom and took down the only wedding photo still hanging, the one I had kept, up to remind myself why I fell in love. I gave it one final glance. Derek in a suit, me in a white dress, both smiling wide under string lights and wildflowers in a friend's backyard. I folded it, didn't tear it, just placed it in a box and sealed it. Finally, I placed the envelope with the documents and ultrasound on the dining table, where he'd see it first when walking in. Alongside it, I wrote one short line on a sticky note. You don't need to find me, I've already found myself. By 10 p.m. everything was out of the apartment. I stood by the door, taking one last look. The furniture was gone, the photos too. Not a single trace of me remained, only scattered memories left exactly where they belonged, in the past. I closed the door quietly. No sound. No turning back. Derek returned to the apartment Sunday afternoon per his schedule, after giving it his all with the band in Houston. I knew the exact moment he opened the door, because the calls started less than 30 minutes later. The first came while I was folding baby clothes into drawers at the new apartment in Round Rock. The phone buzzed non-stop, then paused, then buzzed again. A message followed the third call. Jessica! Where are you? What the hell is going on? 10 minutes later. The apartment's empty, you took everything? Are you kidding me? Then came a string of calls from unknown numbers, probably Derek borrowing friends' phones since I'd blocked his. The next message came with a very different tone. "You can't do this, we're married, you're carrying my child, you have no right." I sighed, put the phone down, and continued stacking diapers and soft towels into the drawer. I had prepared for this storm. That didn't make it any less violent. That night, as I sat with my feet up, hand on my belly, I got an email from my attorney, confirmation that the official legal notice had been delivered to Derek regarding the forgery lawsuit and unilateral divorce filing due to emotional harm. Less than an hour later, I received Derek's final message. Sent via email. "Do you really think you can destroy me? You'll pay for humiliating me like this. I'm getting my child back. You'll have nothing left." I forwarded it to Attorney Holden. She replied simply, "Even better, the more he shows his true self, the easier it is for us." The next day, Evan came to my new apartment carrying a cloth tote bag. He placed it on the dining table, sat across from me, and was quiet for a moment before saying, "You need to know this." "I should have told you earlier." Evan exhaled. "Before you, Derek dated a girl named Naomi. They were together for about a year. After they broke up, she posted on Facebook, hinting that she'd been emotionally manipulated, isolated from her friends, and constantly mocked about her appearance." I froze, my heart sped up. She never named him, but a few close people knew she meant Derek. My parents asked her to take it down. They thought it would damage the family's reputation. My mom even called her. After that, Naomi quietly left Austin. "Do you believe her?" He nodded without hesitation. "I do. Because I've seen what Derek did to you, and what my mom denied back then, I refuse to enable again." The room felt distant, shrinking away, with only the ceiling fan softly humming above us. I used to think I was the first person Derek had ever turned into a hollow version of themselves. Turns out, I was only the first one willing to speak up. 3 days later, Attorney Holden and I submitted the request to investigate the illegal loan under my name, including a full report, forged signatures, bank statements, confirmation emails, and a detailed account of how Derek used my identity. We also submitted a formal letter accusing him of emotional abuse in marriage, backed by 23 audio recordings, some just 30 seconds long, others lasting whole evenings, where he insulted me, mocked my body, and blatantly said, "I don't need to love you anymore. As long as you keep paying rent on time, that's enough." We attached the hospital report from the day I collapsed on the street, evidence that stress had directly impacted my pregnancy health. I didn't expect Derek to stay quiet. He was never the type to lose gracefully. And sure enough, within 48 hours of receiving the court's divorce notification, he launched his defense campaign on social media. He posted old wedding photos captioned with regret. "When you give your youth to someone, and they leave before you even finish becoming who you are." His friends began messaging me, some with questions, some defending him outright, but surprisingly, many others apologized. A fellow bandmate messaged, "I've heard Derek say things no man should say to a woman, especially one carrying his child. I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner." Another woman, the ex-girlfriend of their drummer, sent a private message. "I used to think you were cold, but after hearing what he did, I just want to say, you're braver than people realize." I read every word, not to feel comforted, but to confirm one thing. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't too sensitive. I wasn't overreacting like Derek used to say. I was someone who had endured for too long and finally chose to stand up, not for revenge, but to protect myself and the life growing inside me. And from the moment Derek read the legal statement with the list of charges alongside the hospital report, I knew for the first time in his life, he no longer got to decide how this story ends. I gave birth on a morning in early June when the sun hadn't turned harsh yet, but sweat had already begun to gather in my palms. Labor came nearly 2 weeks early. The night before, I'd only felt a dull ache in my lower back, what I assumed were false contractions like the previous times. But by dawn, the cramps came fast and sharp, my belly tightened, and my water broke right in the living room as I was buttoning my nightgown. Rachel was asleep on the sofa. She bolted upright when she heard me call. She didn't panic. She wrapped a blanket around my shoulders, called a cab, and held me upright, while reassuring me in an eerily calm voice. "It's okay. I'm here." Everything's going to be fine. Evan arrived at the hospital in under 20 minutes. Even though he was working a night shift, he left mid-duty, still in his firefighter uniform, walking into the delivery ward with a gym bag slung over his shoulder and a bottle of coconut water in hand. As I lay on the delivery table, gripping Rachel's hand, sweat pouring from my forehead, I realized I wasn't afraid anymore. There was no husband beside me, no one filming or taking photos to capture a magical moment. But I had my sister. And I had a quiet man standing behind me for nearly 3.5 hours. Just to hand me cold towels and say, "You're doing amazing, Chloe's going to be so proud." And then, at 6:34 a.m., her cry cut through every bit of exhaustion. When they laid her on my chest, red, warm, trembling as she searched instinctively for my breast, I didn't cry. I simply gazed at her quietly, as if trying to memorize every delicate feature of her face. One side of her nose was sharp like Derek's. But those eyes were mine. So clearly mine. "Hello, baby," I whispered. "I've waited so long for you." I didn't tell Derek about the birth right away. My lawyer sent a proper email with basic medical info and a copy of the birth certificate. I requested that all future communication go through legal representation. Derek's first reaction was rage. He sent a 4-paragraph email blaming me for intentionally cutting him off and claiming I had stolen a sacred moment from a father. My lawyer replied briefly. My client gave birth under significant emotional stress and was under no obligation to inform someone who had previously inflicted serious harm on her. At this time, we are proceeding with a supervised visitation arrangement with restricted hours. The court approved the proposal, based on previously submitted evidence. Derek showed up to the first visitation when Chloe was 5 weeks old. He arrived 12 minutes late, wearing a gray hoodie and sunglasses, carrying a stuffed bear bigger than the baby chair. Chloe slept through the entire visit. He sat in a chair, asked a few awkward questions, and then spent the rest of the time playing with his phone. The supervisor, a stern middle-aged woman, jotted down notes. I sat in the corner, silently. At the second visit, Chloe cried a lot due to a growth spurt. Derek looked irritated the whole time, complained that the baby's way too fussy, and asked to leave early after 40 minutes. After that, he began canceling. First it was traffic, then last-minute work, then silence. He no-showed 3 times in a row. My lawyer requested that the court take note. I wasn't surprised, but each time I had to say, "Your dad didn't come," a part of me still sank. One night, as Rachel and I were folding baby clothes, she asked me, "Does it make you sad that Chloe won't have a real father?" I shook my head. "I'm sad, but not because she doesn't have a father. I'm sad because she had the chance to have one, and he wasn't decent enough to keep it." 3 months postpartum, I returned to therapy. With the same counselor I'd seen near the end of my pregnancy. "How does it feel now that Derek is no longer part of your daily life?" she asked. I smiled softly. "Strange. Sometimes it feels empty. But it doesn't hurt anymore. It's like stepping out of a moldy room. And now, I'm opening all the windows to let the sunlight in." I also joined a support group for single mothers at the community center. Once a week I met other women, some young, some older, sharing stories, fears, and dreams yet to come true. No one judged. No one rushed to fix each other. We just listened. And sometimes, that alone is enough to save someone for one more day. I opened a savings account for Chloe. Nothing big, just a few $100s to start. But with every paycheck I transfer a set amount. It's my promise to her. You won't have to start from zero. Evan visits every weekend. He doesn't say much, but he always brings something. A box of diapers, small toys, sometimes a warm loaf of bread. One time, he held Chloe close and said softly, "I can't replace anyone, but I'll be here if you ever need me." I turned away to hide my tear-filled eyes. We don't talk about Derek much anymore. Not because we forgot, but because we don't need to be reminded of what we've already walked through. Now, every morning when I wake up in this sunlit little apartment and carry my daughter onto the balcony, watching the sunlight spill over the green treetops, I don't think about what I lost. I only think about what I'm building. Alone, but not lonely. Some goodbyes don't happen because love ran out. but because we finally have the courage to face the truth. Some people are not meant to walk with us through parenthood. I didn't choose to be a single mom, but I chose to be a mother who lights the path for her child with healthy love instead of clinging to a fractured image that raises a child in silence and confusion. And you? Have you ever had to make a difficult decision not for yourself, but for someone smaller, voiceless? Do you believe that sometimes walking away isn't failure but the bravest way to begin again? Share your thoughts in the comments, because your story might be the light someone else needs to find their way out of the dark. And if you'd like to keep walking alongside stories like this, stories of family, love, breaking down and rising again, don't forget to follow the channel so you don't miss the moments that may quietly reach your heart when you least expect it.